Very fascinating story. She's, like everyone on the panel, is someone who has gone through some, what we would consider extremely challenging circumstances, who learned from what happened and who made lemonade from lemons. These are all people who have taken very trying circumstances and made something positive out of it. She started an organization called From Strength to Strength, which helps support victims of terror, which she is as well. And I'm going to let her run the program and introduce the other panelists. And we apologize that the system we have here always, I see, is finally working. So we had to switch systems from one to the other at the last minute for some reason. It wasn't working. So with God's help, we now have the audio and video to show you everybody. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being here and coming to listen. And I'll give it up to Sarah. No, it will be filmed. So I think we're just...
Okay, so good evening. I just want to take the opportunity. Can everyone hear me on the other side of the room? Okay, great. I want to thank Rabbi Jacobs and Esther for all their hard work in putting this together. I think that this is definitely the way for us to leave Tisha B'Av as we move on to other things that are happening through the course of the next set of holidays that happen during the year. As Rabbi Jacobs mentioned, I run an organization called Strength to Strength where we work with victims of terrorism. 11 years ago, and I'm not going to go too much into my story because I really want to focus on the other panel speakers for you, but maybe Rabbi Jacobs will have us come back and speak at some time in the future. But 11 years ago, I was on a bus in Jerusalem when an 18-year-old Palestinian boarded the bus and detonated. He injured over 100 of us on and off the bus, and he murdered 16 innocent people, including all those seated and standing around me. The doctors aren't really sure how I survived with the injuries that I did. I was hospitalized for almost 2 weeks at Hadassah Hospital. And going through something like that is a very, very difficult and traumatic thing, but I always believe, and I was brought up, that it's not what we do with what happens to us, it's what we do the next day. And it's really important as Jews that when we look at us in Jewish history, and Tisha B'Av is the perfect example of that for us, is that there's always been these terrible things that have happened. And what we do is that we have something...
Hello?
Just talking to yourself for the time.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
She can't hear us.
No?
No, I don't think she can hear us.
Okay, I will call.
Okay. I think that what happens is that in Jewish history for us, this is the time where we really realize what has gone on and all the things that have happened to us in history and how we have to take it and rise up and move forward and really just try and do what we can to make the world a better place. And this time of year, and
Hi, Adam.
I mentioned,
Hello.
Reminding that we're all live right now.
I see everybody there. I see 3 people. I see myself in the corner.
she needs
But I
to
can't
mute
hear
us.
anything.
She needs to mute us for the moment.
You can be heard. You can be heard from there. You go on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
Take on the screen. It says you can access meeting controls here.
Oh, thanks.
You can be
Wait, what do I?
Okay, thanks. Great. So this time of year is always a very difficult time for me. It's more so because, when we go from Tisha B'Av to Yom Kippur, which are both the major fasts for us throughout the year, there's a difference between the 2 fasts. Tisha B'Av is all about mourning, and Yom Kippur is more of a spiritual holiday where we repent and then we're forgiven and then we move forward and hopefully the next year we try to do better. For me, this time of year is not about really Tisha B'Av in terms of the mourning, but now when Tisha B'Av ends, I realize now it's coming up and getting closer to Yom Kippur, and the ideas in my head are, I'm going to be judged now for what's going to happen to me for the next year. And I think that the first Yom Kippur after the terrorist attack, because my attack was in June, that first Yom Kippur was the first time ever in my life that I really understood what it meant to stand before God on one of the holiest days of the year and realize that I was being judged for the next year of what was going to happen to me. And so it meant so much of a different thing for me to really go through that, through something so terrible, to how to move forward and live my life the best I can. And I think that throughout everything, and I'll go through it a little bit more as we go through the different speakers, but I've learned a lot of important lessons over the last 10 years. And one of the most important things that I've learned is that the most important things to us are not the physical things that we have, but it's our family and our friends and our support, and really our community that makes us who we are, and that in the worst of times, they're the ones that can really help us to move forward. And I feel very blessed that I have an incredible support system of friends and family and community that have really helped me to get to where I am today. And so when I look at what has happened, I am a victim of terrorism, but I'm also a survivor because I've learned to take that experience, build an organization through that, which we work with victims all over the world to show that terrorism is not one country's problem, it's a world problem, and we all have to work together to combat the hate that we all experienced on that day. And I think that this is just the right setting for all of you to understand a little better what people who go through tragedy are really going through on a daily basis, but how we move forward and we deal with what we've been through to make our lives better and hopefully to make the world better. So with that, I think we can start with maybe, do you want to start with Debbie?
Well, whatever you want.
She's got a lot to say, I think.
Yeah, let's do that.
Hello?
Now she's not, we don't see her face. Oh, we don't see hands. I think that was me. She might not.
Hello?
Hi, Debbie.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Can you raise your camera up so we can see you?
Better?
No, we only see your midsection.
Okay, let's speak there. Like that?
Well, now it's black.
Oh, here we go. I see me. There we go. Hi, guys.
Hi, okay, so I'm gonna hang up and you have 10 minutes to tell your story now, okay?
And you guys can hear me through the computer because I hear nothing.
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, okay. I'll leave that to you now, okay? Okay, thank you. Okay, bye-bye. Hi, good evening. I hope you guys can hear me. If you can, send me a sign. Like, you signed something. You guys hear me? Anybody? Okay. First of all, I want to tell you that I'm very honored to be part of this, and I think that Transcending Tragedy was actually getting hooked up to this event. That to me was Transcending Tragedy. I'm going to do a quick background and tell my story. I have no way of hearing many feedback, so this is an interesting experience, so let's go for it. In order to go forward, you have to go backwards. So I'm going to start that I was born, you can guess how many years ago, to Holocaust surviving parents, and I was raised in a small Midwestern town. I went to a religious school, I went to a religious camp, and I went to a religious synagogue my entire life, but I was not raised religious. So I was culturally very Jewish. I knew the laws, but I didn't keep anything. When I was a teenager, I began to search on my own, and I wanted to go for what I thought was the truth and what I had been learning, and I decided to become religious and told my parents that I wanted to do this. God gave me my first test a year later. I don't know how old Abraham was when he got his first test. A year later, when I was 16, my father came down with a very fatal form of leukemia. And I watched my 6'2", cigar-smoking, skiing father become a very weak and very frail individual who cried out at night. During that time, I got married, and I wanted to form a true Torah home, have as many children as I could and as many guests. I went on to have 11 children, hosted dozens and dozens of people every weekend, and I thought I had the perfect life. My then spouse was either working or learning, and I was enmeshed with my kids and my guests, and it was wonderful. Years later, light of my then spouse's activities became public, and my family has faced catastrophic consequences from that. It was a public story, it was a humiliating story, and it rocked us at our very core. I had 10 children at home, one married daughter, and I needed to make some very quick decisions and some very hard decisions. I enrolled in social work school on scholarship and proceeded to get my master's. I love being a social worker. I love working with people from the strength perspective and helping people find their solutions and hearing their stories and reveling in everybody's unique personality, much like looking at snowflakes. I subsequently got divorced. I was now enrolled in a PhD program in social work. I was working full-time and I was raising 9 children at home. I was not married. Life was very busy, very hectic, but very fulfilling. My oldest son began to lose weight at a rapid rate, couldn't keep anything down, and we went from doctor to doctor to doctor who diagnosed a metabolic problem, a hormonal issue, something that could be fixed with some medicine. He would start the medicine, and 2 weeks later, the symptoms would come back with force. At that time, I was making my first SIMPA post-divorce, my son's bar mitzvah, and I was running around working and going to school and on with my BlackBerry on my list. I was going to put together a really memorable affair, and it was memorable. 2 weeks before my son's bar mitzvah, my oldest son was diagnosed with brain cancer. I remember sitting at Hasselhoff at NYU and looking up at God and saying, okay, now what? Here I am barely getting my head above water. I'm a single mom. Now my son has brain cancer. What do you want me to do? My son had struggled his whole life in yeshiva. And I have to say that I learned more lessons from my son during the time of his illness than I've ever learned in my life. It was also during this time and during the time of Superstorm Sandy that I was able to meet my husband, who provided the first ray of light in a very, very dark time. As my son was given better than 90% chance of survival, we all rallied around him. We took turns, we did shifts, and we were very excited. He finished his chemotherapy and was about to go for his radiation when I became engaged, and we were planning a summer wedding. That Friday, I got a call from the doctor right before he was about to start radiation that he had relapsed, and they found me growths on the skin. The room started to spin. I grabbed my chair, and I didn't know what to do. My husband and I decided to hold the wedding a week later on Shushan Forum so my son could attend before we started treatment. Shortly after our wedding, my son entered the hospital and never got out. His condition deteriorated until he was no longer able to see. He couldn't swallow. He couldn't swallow his own saliva, and numerous pneumonias set in. Over the summer, we watched my wonderful, beautiful son continue to deteriorate. And at one point, we had a wonderful organization send in a group that sang for him, the 8th Day Band. And my son requested the song Abraham twice. The lyrics stay with me to this day. And the lyrics are, Abraham, are we the children that you dreamed of? Are we that shining star you see at night? You know it's true, we call you Avinu. Our Father, our pride, we've got your soul inside, take us home. My son slipped into a coma. There were no other options, and we got the fateful call to come. We raced to the hospital, running madly up First Avenue, got into my son's room, and his blood pressure was dropping, and he was not breathing. Immediately, my husband started to say the prayers that you say as the soul is departing from this world, and nothing was happening. My son was barely breathing, and he was hanging on. After saying the departing prayers 2, 3, and 4 times, he was still in this world, and nobody could understand why. Finally, my husband called an Indian, and unfortunately, at the New York Cancer Hospital, there was no Indian. And Jews of every stripe and every color came into the room, Hafidim, the nurse who was religious, people who were visiting the sick, and they began to sing Mishmas. And the very, very last pasuk that they said, my son gave a shudder, and he died. He was the last plane out of New York, right before Rosh Hashanah, and the last funeral to be held in Jerusalem. And he was buried 4:30 in the afternoon, with Rosh Hashanah being 6 o'clock, 10 months ago. I learned so much from my son. I learned acceptance. I learned how to face the worst and the most terrible obstacles in your life with grace and dignity. And just as my son lived, he died. Jews of every stripe and every color were at his funeral. I got letters from people that I never knew, Hasidim, Litvish, Sephardi, modern, unaffiliated. And several months after his death, I got a knock on the door from somebody who just came to collect charity, just to see my son, because he would also always give him a sandwich when he came. I want to end with one more story that shows you who we can become when faced in the worst of situations. The weekend before my wedding, I was laying in bed, just trying to get my head to calm. And my bedroom door was open, and all of a sudden my son, who had had emergency head surgery and could not see very well, was coming up 16 stairs holding a tray, weaving from side to side, holding this tray. When he came into the room and set the tray down in front of me, I saw that it was coffee, egg, sugar, creamer, all arranged beautifully. And I said to him, Barak, what is this? And with the biggest smile on his face, he said, Mommy, you're the bride, and I just want to make you happy. We can triumph from anything. We can find the truth and the goodness if we look. Life has given all of us, and I am honored to be part of this panel, many obstacles. And my fervent hope to God that with each challenge all of us are given, we look into ourselves for the deeper awareness, for the deeper truth, and we're able to serve Hashem the way my son did, and to go with total grace and dignity and love of God. I hope this is the last Tisha B'Av that we all celebrate in exile together. And may we all dance in the streets of Yerushalayim next year. Thank you.
She can't hear us, but that was definitely, we all go through different traumas in our lives and different things that are going on. And Tisha B'Av is definitely all about the things that we've been through. But when you hear somebody else's story, you can't help but to sort of empathize and relate to the hard part of what they're going through. And so I feel like no matter what trauma you've been through in your life, trauma is trauma, but we have to look towards what happens afterwards and transcend ourselves to make the world much better. And I think by Debbie sharing her story, we get to remember her son, and we get to hear a little bit about her life and all the things that she's overcome. Our next speaker, I'm going to let everyone introduce their own story to you because I think it's really important for them to share and not for me to introduce them and really give you their bio. But our next speaker is Wendy Lansky, who is sitting right next to me, and she'll share a little bit of her personal experience with you.
Thank you. As Sari and our last speaker expressed, it is truly an honor to be here today. Transcending Tragedy, just when I hear that name, there's something about it that just has an uplifting spirit to me. What I'd like to do with you tonight is just talk a little bit about my story, why I'm here tonight, and kind of what I've learned from my own experience. I'm a 9/11 survivor. And by that I mean on 9/11/2001, I was on the 29th floor of the North Tower when the plane hit. It was an ordinary day. I was an ordinary person and went through a series of extraordinary events. And certainly I can't sum them up in a few minutes, but just to give you an overview of what I went through. I was getting ready to go to a meeting. I heard a tremendous thud. I instinctually went towards the staircase because an interesting part about being in an emergency is there are no bells, there's no whistles, there's no authority figure to give you direction. So what I did is I just went towards the stairs. And as I got down the stairs, I started to smell jet fuel. And back in those days, before the age of smartphones, where we didn't have information and we had heard originally that a small plane, a Cessna, had hit our building, I didn't understand why I could smell jet fuel if something small hit so far above. I asked one of the many firemen that was passing by me in the stairs what exactly hit my building, and the answer I received was a jet plane. And for those of us born and raised in New York like myself, we said that doesn't make sense. But we still, thankfully, didn't know it was terrorism. And we went down the stairs with relative coordination because we thought pilot error, maybe a pilot had a heart attack. We didn't know what was happening. As I began to go down the stairs and more jet fuel was in the stairways and more water, instinctually again, I knew something was wrong. but I let my mind just shut down for a moment and I said, I need to survive whatever this is. And I continued down the stairs. When I got down to the lobby was just in bits and pieces. Every piece of glass, every piece of marble. Picture the grandest hotel you've ever been to if you hadn't had the fortune of going to World Trade, and just like a horror movie, everything being gone. An emergency worker surrounding you and saying, cover your head, go as fast as you can outside, pointing towards an exit, and whatever you do, don't look up. I guess it's human nature when someone tells you not to do something, what do? Especially a rebellious Jew from New York. So I look up, partially to see what's coming at me so I can escape. And it's the things that the news portrayed and then some. Huge debris, glass, water, papers, and the saddest of all, people. And the images of those people and what they must have seen to make a conscious decision to jump out of a building and die in front of me, I can't imagine what kind of thoughts they had as their last thoughts. And the sounds. And there is no amount of counseling or therapy that gets that out of your head. My story, I guess I can say, is a positive one because I'm still here. But the rest of the day and the rest of the escape was even harder than going down those first 29 flights. I ultimately was rescued by a ferry boat after being taken over a railing and taken across the water to Jersey City. Several times through the day, before the rescue, I consciously remember myself saying, I'm going to die. And then another side of me said, this is not how I want to die. I didn't want to die from an asthma attack, from inhaling all of the things in the street, so I yelled out into the crowd, does anybody have an inhaler? As I'm running, and someone threw me one, took a couple puffs, threw it back. I remember thinking, because I'm accident prone, don't fall, don't trip. The survival instincts keep coming in. But as this is happening, I'm thinking of all of the death around me. And as I pulled out by ferry and I looked back, and my city that I grew up in, it looked like it was gone. The entire skyline, everything was gone. Originally on the news, there were reports that everyone from my company had gotten out alive. And I couldn't believe that. I thought, what a miracle, what incredible luck that my company with 2,000 employees, that everyone got out. But sadly, that was not a true statement. And I got a phone call asking if I had heard from my friend, Abraham Zelmanowitz. And I said, no, I didn't hear from Abe. And someone said, well, he was last seen waiting with his friend. And before they even got out the friend's name, my mind went, and I said, of course. Abe's friend was a gentleman by the name of Ed B.A., who was a quadriplegic in a wheelchair. And I knew instantly that Abe was gone, because I knew that not only would Abe stay with Ed, Abe would have stayed with anyone. Abe would have stayed with anyone in this room who he'd never even known the name of. Wouldn't matter what religion, creed, color, that was Abe. And to be that selfless is something that I don't even know the words for. After 9/11, I lived for years, and I still have it, the survivor's guilt that happens when anyone survives any kind of a tragedy. For me, a lot of mine was around my friend Abe. Abe was a religious man, an observant Orthodox man. I'm the opposite of that. I'm quite reformed, and I guess you could say somewhat non-religious, although I have become a little bit more religious over the years. And I thought, how could this man, who's done so much, who's lived an observant life, a person who was loved by his nieces and nephews and family, someone who's done so much, why is he gone? And why am I here? And finally one day, like a light bulb went off in my head that, you know what, maybe I, one person, Wendy Lansky, am not meant to know the secrets of the universe, and maybe someday when I'm no longer here, that will be revealed. The topic of tonight is Transcending Tragedy. And as I said, I wanted to start off just kind of talking a little bit about my tragedy, but now taking it to what did I learn and what did I get from it? I got from it a feeling that anything that you think you can't live through, the human spirit, no matter what you believe, somehow gives you the strength to move on. Some of that is not by mistake. Some of that, as Sarah and others have described, is family, is friends, is your own set of beliefs, and is who you are as a person. 6 months after 9/11, I was in DC at the Holocaust Museum, and I wanted to make a donation in Abe's name. And I met a gentleman who was a Holocaust survivor. And I had met Holocaust survivors over the years and always found it profound when I had conversations. But this one, because of what I had gone through, was extremely profound for me. He said to me, "My dear, never look to forget what has happened to you. Incorporate it into who you are, because this is a new you. This is who you are." And that has always stayed with me. And what I've tried to do with my tragedy is I've tried to educate. I was blessed with meeting Sari and being part of Strength to Strength, where I can meet terrorism survivors not only in this country but around the world. I volunteer at the Tribute Center and educate people about 9/11, what happened there, to let people know, to keep Abe and the other almost 3,000 people's memory alive. And I try to be a better person, whatever that means. And it means different things to all of us. I try to not let little stupid things that happen day to day in our road rage or something that happens at work or anything stupid, it doesn't matter. And I try to tell people it doesn't matter. What matters? What matters is since 9/11, I met a wonderful man. I was going through a divorce during 9/11. I'm now remarried to the love of my life. I enjoy my family. I enjoy the mitzvahs and joys that happen in my family, weddings, babies, all of the good stuff. We lose everybody?
You're good.
You're good. I'll just keep going.
Yep.
And just making it count. A lot of people who've been through tragedies kind of end these type of talks by saying, I'm glad that this happened to me because I'm a better person. I'm not going to say I'm glad this happened to me, because I'm not. And I would give up every lesson I've learned for the 3,000 people that died that day. But we can't go back. It's not productive. We can only go forward. So I hope that every day is a learning experience for me and a chance for me to help someone or help something. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Wendy. It's interesting what Wendy's saying about, everyone experiences trauma, and especially when you go through something like terrorism very differently. I fortunately did not know anybody that was on the bus with me, so the survivor's guilt is not what I go through. I just never looked at it as to why this happened to me, but more of what am I going to do now with it? And that, the Yiddish saying of man plans and God laughs, I always think God is laughing at me over and over again. But that's okay, because it's all in his hands. And at the end of the day, whatever happened to me was what he wanted. And obviously I'm still here for a reason, as many people who've survived traumatic things are here to be able to do something good. And I remember when I was at the hospital the day after surgery, a friend of mine had called me from the States, and she said, on the bus, everyone around me did not survive. So the girl sitting next to me, her fiance that was standing, the 2 rows in front of me, within that vicinity was most of the people of the 16 that were murdered. They said that the terrorist was about 2 people standing away from where I was seated. And my friend said, I told her that the doctors weren't really sure how I got out with what they called kal, which is lightly injured in Israel. And she said, well, I think that you survived because the people that were around you were protecting you for all the good things that you have done over the years in the world, all the good that you have accomplished, all the kindness you've done. And the next day I spoke to my rabbi on the phone, and I said to him what my friend had said, because I had a hard time dealing with this, because I didn't think that I survived over somebody else because of what I had done versus what they had done in the world. And my rabbi said to me something that I take with me every single day. He says, you didn't survive for what you did in the past, you survived for what you're going to do in the future. And I think it's really important that we live our lives that way, that we live for what's going to be in the future and making it the best that it can be instead of focusing on what we did previously. And so I just wanted to share that with you as I'm listening to some of the thoughts that are going on with some of our speakers. At this moment, I'd like to introduce Autumn.
I'll be next to her.
Okay.
Yep, she's ready.
She's ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce Autumn Gillis. Autumn's actually on the West Coast, and she's going to share her story with you. Is she ready to go?
Yep.
Hi. Okay, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you. I know it's getting close to the end of the fast. I'll try to keep my 12-hour saga and the 5 years battling of PTSD after the tragedy to a minimum, to the 10 minutes. But it is a little hard. There was a lot that happened. So on November 26, 2008, I was at dinner in a restaurant called Marsala Craft in the Taj Mahal Hotel, and towards the end of dinner, terrorists attacked. Started with gunshots, heard the gunshots. I can still remember the waiter lunging for the doors, closing and locking them, turning down the lights. I got under the table. The table was in front of a window that was on the hallway from the table. Fortunately, there was a thin curtain, dark enough to cover me on one side of the window, but light enough for me to see the flashes of light coming from the muzzle of the gun as the bullets are exiting. I realized that he could turn his gun and start spraying, and I would be on the other side, so I signaled to my colleagues that I was going to move back, and I started crawling to the other side of the restaurant. On the other side of the restaurant, there were windows to a corridor. I was hoping to get out, not corridor, courtyard, hoping to get out and, flee from the courtyard. The fight and flight syndrome kicked in for me. I just really wanted to fly as far away as I could from the danger. There was an employee there shutting shutters on these windows, and I said to him, "You've got to let us out of here." And he said, "No, ma'am, you don't know how many there are, where they are, you have to get down." And I said, "No, we're sitting ducks here. They're going to come back and get us. We have to get out." And I remember seeing people on the other side of the courtyard exiting through a door and thinking, I want to get out. I want to get through that door and get out to freedom. But he prevailed. He kept his calm and composure, knew what he was doing, and he gently pushed me down and closed the shutters. And within a second, they were shooting in the courtyard. And that's not the first time that night that one of the employees of the Taj Mahal staff saved my life. I think it was probably 2 to 3 minutes. Of course, it seemed more like 2 hours that the gunfire was occurring on the back courtyard side. I was with 15 other restaurant patrons in this corner of this restaurant, and the tension and fear was palpable. It's like you could take a knife and slice through it. There was a baby crying. I remember thinking that I also felt what all of us were thinking, which was, please the baby, settles down. The baby's going to give us away, and we're going to get slaughtered. Also, think mother would calm down. I'm sure the baby's more frightened because of her heartbeat racing, rather than the booms from the gun. Eventually, the gunfire started moving away very methodically, and after a few minutes of silence, the restaurant staff signaled us to come into the kitchen. We were in the kitchen for about 45 minutes while they were working with other staff to help move and get us to a safer area. They sent us through the staff corridor to the area called the chambers. And in the chambers, there was about 300 people from other restaurants and banquet, meeting rooms, hotel rooms, and they were gathering us there. They said that this is the first time the word terrorist came up. They said they had the terrorists come down on the other side of the hotel and that we were surrounded. At that time, we were actually surrounded by staff. We basically had a human wall, not military or police there. About an hour later, there was a large explosion. They had set off a large explosion near the dome, and the thin bit of security that was there that was holding them back in one of the areas of the hotel had to retreat from the fire and smoke, and they lost control of the terrorists. it leaked to the press that there was a large contingent in an area called the Chambers. There were European members of Parliament and Indian ministers. That was a curse and a blessing, a curse in that we became a very high target for the terrorists, but also a blessing because I think that we probably got some resources we might not have otherwise gotten. A short time while the staff tried to evacuate us, knowing that we weren't really safe anymore. During the evacuation, the terrorists saw some of the people leaving and they started firing. My colleagues and I were at the very back, very end. We had only taken like 3 steps when the gunshots started. I ducked underneath a coffee table and put a napkin over my head. I just didn't want to see anything that was going to happen. I heard a lot of loud bangs, but knew they weren't gunshots or explosions. I was thinking, oh, they're fighting the terrorists, they're fighting them back. Hopefully they'll overcome them. And then it got quiet, and after a minute or so of stillness, people around me started popping their heads up and getting up, and I came out from under the coffee table, and it turns out that people, as they were stampeding back in, knocked over chairs and tables, and that's what those loud bangs were. About half the people were able to get out and get to safety, and there was still half of us remaining. Many of us were in this larger room at one of the ends of the chambers, and we all kind of gathered in the center and turned down the lights. I was right by a couch the entire time through this ordeal. I was always kind of looking for a place I could take cover, so that was the couch. About 30 minutes later, you heard gunshots again. They had gotten into the staff area that supported the chambers. I was able to get under the couch, take cover under the couch, and I spent the next 7.5 hours under there. The terrorists moved from some of the outer facilities into some of the rooms in the chambers, and you could hear an explosion and then single shots, another explosion and more single shots, and then one got closer, single shots, and then yet another explosion closer and single shots. And I was there under the couch and coming to terms with the fact that they were next door, and the next room was going to be the room that myself and others were in, and my death is impending. Stopping and going back just a bit, when I was 15, my best friend committed suicide, so I experienced loss of life early on, and one of the things I learned was like the short label, and I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly with my life, and to me it didn't matter what school I went to, what career I chose, what company I worked for. I just didn't want to die with regrets. I wanted to live a full life, take risks, and make the most of it. So here I was, under a couch, hiding from terrorists, and probably about to lose my life, and I was okay with it. Not that I wanted it to happen, but I lived a full life, and everything I did led me up to that moment, and I wouldn't change anything I had done. So I got ready for what was about to happen. Then on the other side, I hear glass breaking, things breaking, gunshots, and there's rallying. So some commandos had gotten to the other side and stopped the terrorists from going any further and engaged them. There was a battle right outside the room we were in. And the fighting went on, off and on, all around the area that we were in for about 4 hours. After about 4 hours, it moved to other areas of the hotel, and I think the National Security Guard from New Delhi got in. They were able to provide a little bit more protection and keep them further away from us. There were still several hours of waiting until they could secure another evacuation for us. At 10 in the morning, they did start a second evacuation. Come out from the doors of the room I'm in, there's a pool of blood, and there's bullet shells and glass, and I had to step over many pools of blood along the way to get out. And with the first bus was filled out with people and escorted out. The second bus wasn't under the cover. We went to go get on the bus, and we were fired on again. Fortunately, still not shot, and was able to survive that as well, get on a bus, and vacate the area safely. It was a very long, tragic experience. 160 people from different nationalities, different religions died. Getting through the terrorist attacks actually turned out to be easy. The aftermath, dealing with the PTSD and survivor guilt, has been a real challenge. I wanted to just try to get back to life, to live. I was living. I was thankful I got out on Thanksgiving Day, of all days. I find that amazing, kind of poetic. But 3 years of living in this flight loop, this fight or flight loop, took a large toll on my body. Emotionally, I was completely destroyed and lost. Everything that I had loved to do and had meaning lost its meaning. I didn't quite know how to live. I knew that there was a few things that were important to me. Community, love, and health became my top 3 priorities. But I was struggling to incorporate them and make them more of a priority that I was active with. I ended up, my body just pretty much shut down after about 3.5 years. I started to go into depression on year 3 after the attacks. And then another 6 months later or so, physically, my body said, you're done. And I have put it through a lot because I was constantly activated. So I started focusing on my healing. I've worked with a lot of different types of therapies and modalities. One of the things I've discovered is art. I never considered myself an artist before. I could only do little stick people, and I still wouldn't exactly call myself an artist. I call it glorified scribbling. I just kind of paint and then scribbling to me, and I paint it into shapes, which turn into scenery, and it turns into something beautiful. The people that I've met along the way. One of the things I've had to learn is to ask for help. I was very independent, and I wasn't used to asking for help. And thank God I have, because I've learned that people can be so giving and caring and loving, and I need to see that love after seeing such hatred that day. And a chance for me to give back too. So I try to be very involved with my family and friends, organizations like Strength to Strength, supporting other victims. I hope to, in the future, do more charity and community work where I'm supporting wounded warriors, etc. A choice. So before this all happened, I said, you have a choice to be happy, and I would choose to be happy. And it became natural. I did it so much, but I kind of lost that afterwards. Right now, I'm in the process of choosing to live and be active in the fact that I'm living. And sometimes I naturally really fully feel happy. Other times, I have to remember and choose to see the positive and be happy. But I trust that going through and doing this over and over, that it will become more natural and easier, and I won't have to work so hard at being happy. Color and nature, that's another thing. There was a period where I didn't see color. I was so depressed. I was in so much physical pain that I just didn't see color. And now I see color. I try to paint that. I try to point it out to my little nieces and nephews and cousins, sharing in that capacity. Right now, me giving to communities, my closer community, and I hope to continue to branch out. Letting go of ego. Even after what happened and knowing that nothing's really important and I'm pretty insignificant, I think we're trained to think about ourselves and being big and the best we can, but it's about little things, and those little things add up. One little pebble being thrown in a pond is going to lead these many ripples that stretch to all shores of the pond. So you don't need to do a lot, just do a little in your very close proximity, and it can end up leaving lasting influences. So those are a few things that have helped me transcend my tragedy and help me grow and become a better person out of that horrific event.
Okay, so with the time we have left, for as many of us are probably really hungry or thirsty, questions for any of the panelists? Any questions at all? Yes?
Autumn sort of touched on this, but she mentioned that she was okay with what was taking place at a certain point. My mother told me a story. She almost drowned when she was younger, and she said that at first it was a tremendous struggle to stay alive, and she said at a certain point, she said she let go, and everything just sort of suddenly seemed okay. And I always wonder for people who are in these situations, if it's just pure terror that you feel, or is there some light that comes into it while it's happening also?
I mean, for the other panelists, for myself, I think it's a very different. Mine happened and then it happened instantly. So I didn't have time to react or to think about if I'm going to survive or not. But I think my first initial thing was I didn't think it was a terrorist attack. I thought we got into a bus accident. But the last thing that I thought was that someone strapped explosives onto themselves to hurt or murder innocent people. So I think that my mind, it's funny what the mind says in situations like that. I was pulled from the bus by a first responder and brought to the side of the road where an old Israeli woman waited with me, and she wasn't the police, she wasn't like David Adom, and she was really waiting with me as if she were a parent waiting for her child to get help. And she told them that she wanted to find my family in the hospital, and the way that she found me was she said that I was talking in English, and the only thing that I kept saying was, oh my God, my parents are going to kill me, they're going to make me come home from Israel because of this. And that was like the first thing that I was thinking about, that my parents are going to make me leave a place that I love so much. It wasn't the fear of what happened, because I think the body just kind of, it goes into shock, and then the body has a way of I don't know if it's resiliency from the person I am or the way I was raised or my family, but I think that somehow those things just happen. But maybe, Wendy could talk about, it was hours and hours as Autumn went through, where I think the difference of how you feel, maybe.
And I was never okay with it, so to speak. I had moments where I said, okay, I think I passed the danger point, and then 5 minutes later, I felt like I was at the highest point of the danger, and I did keep having that, I'm going to die, but I'm going to do all that I can not to die, and I'm going to, even though everything around me is out of my control, what's in my control? It's in my control to make sure I don't fall down. It's in my control to make sure my asthma doesn't kick in, to try to follow as much direction as I can, because every once in a while, my mind would click into, wow, this is how I'm going to die, and then I would almost talk myself out of it and say, this is not productive. Put all of that into how you're going to live and who you're going to live for, and think of something that you can look towards for survival.
Any other questions, any comments, anything that anyone wants to share? I want to take this opportunity as we close off and as Tisha B'Av is slowly coming to an end. We talk about, these situations and the things we've learned from transcending from something that's tragic and moving forward. And I talked about in the beginning the idea of, for me, the support of the friends and the family are really most important. But I'm going to share with you a little personal story. And I know Autumn can't hear us, but it is about Autumn. In January of 2009, I received a phone call from the State Department. And they said to me that there was a victim, an American who had survived Mumbai, and she was really traumatized when I talked to her. And I said, absolutely. And Autumn at the time was living in Amsterdam. And our first conversation in January was about 3 hours long. And we spoke about every 2 or 3 weeks for the next 6 months. And then in June of 2009, I went to Amsterdam for a conference and we met in person. And the point of this is we talked about a lot of things of how a lot of similarities in what we went through and a lot of our feelings. We come from very different backgrounds, we come from very different places. Normally our lives and our paths would have never crossed, except that we share something that bonds us for life. And she's become one of my closest friends and one of my biggest support systems in what I've been through, and I hope for her that I'm one of her support systems. But the idea is that for me, the most important thing is that through this terrible, horrific thing, that I met some of the most amazing people all over the world that I consider family. And I think that as we sort of go from Tisha B'Av now and from the end to go to Av and to Elul and to Yom Kippur, and we see everything that's going on in the world today for us, whether it's in Europe or in Israel and some of the hateful things that are going on, the most significant thing that I've learned from all of this is the revelation of the importance of love and kindness and to combat hate with tenacity and courage. And I think that that's most important for all of us to take that message no matter what we've been through in life. We have to all stand together. We are in this world right now where there's unbelievably terrible hate going on for all of us. And it's not just about the Jewish community, it's much larger than that. And so as someone who's gone through something like this and understands it, I just feel like we all need to come together, and this should be the last Tisha B'Av that we have to spend fasting. And that we really go from strength to strength and learn the lessons from every person that we encounter and every person that enters our life, because we don't know what the next day brings. And I really want to thank our panelists for joining us and for sharing their stories. It's definitely not an easy thing to do. So easy at the end of the fast to be listening also to these type of stories. So thank you all for being here and really being patient listening to something that really is about us, but it really represents thousands and thousands of people in Israel and around the world. And for Debbie's story, it definitely represents and resonates many, many people all over the world that are going through similar situations in terms of loss of love and a child. And so for that, I want to thank her, even though I don't know if she can hear us, but for her sharing her personal story, because again, that's not easy. It's not easy in front of a group of strangers, especially over a video, to really share something that personal. So I really want to thank all of our panelists for doing that. And if anyone has any questions afterwards, we'll be here to answer anything if you didn't want to, ask anything out loud.
Yay.